Hello, everyone, and welcome to our presentation today with Tarana Wireless titled BEAD and Next Gen FWA, The Path to Internet for All, which is short for Broadband Equity Access and Development Program and Next Generation Fixed Wireless Access. Today, we're joined by Gabriel Moran. He is the Government Affairs and Policy Associate at Tarana Wireless. He has a lot of info to cover. Topics today include the current status of BEAD funding as of this month, as well as some upcoming deadlines that everyone needs to take note of. Also, how to ensure that your ISP is up to par with all the eligibility requirements before even applying for funding, and lots more. I'm sure that there are tons of questions out there, and we are here to answer as many as we can. Please submit your questions in the chat window, and we will cover them after the presentation. We will also be recording this webinar for anyone who would like to rewatch it or may have missed it today. So Gabriel, thank you very much for joining us today, and please take it away.
Great. Thanks so much, Jonathan, and thank you to the folks who are attending this call and taking time out of your busy Thursdays to learn a little bit more about BEAD and next generation fixed wireless. As Jonathan said, my name is Gabriel Moran. I am a Government Affairs and Policy Manager at Tarana Wireless, and I've been with the company for a little bit more than a year and 2 months. And in that year, Tarana Wireless has really built out its government affairs function specifically around the BEAD program. In the past, over the last 13 months or so, we've really focused on reaching out to state broadband offices, the NTIA, state legislators, and state governors, educating people about next generation fixed wireless access. A lot of folks in the ISP space certainly understand how Tarana Wireless's technology is so groundbreaking, but it's particularly important at this point in time that we educate folks about the advances that have taken place in fixed wireless and why people do not need to rely on one specific technology type to achieve the goal of universal service. There are three key messages that we really like to communicate with public policy and decision-making audiences. The first is simple. That technology advances. As many folks know, we went from the rotary phone to the iPhone in a matter of decades. The case is similarly true for broadband technology and specifically fixed wireless. A lot of the traditional limitations that have created a bit of a hangover effect around fixed wireless, the inability to handle line of sight, the inability to handle obstructions in line of sight links, the inability to handle environmental interference, and the inability to deliver high levels of throughput have really cast a bit of a pall on fixed wireless as a whole, particularly as generational funding opportunities come to the fore to close the digital divide in this country. We inform them about how next generation fixed wireless is just one example of how the fixed wireless space continues to grow and innovate to meet the needs of Americans today. The second is finances are finite. I think pretty much everybody on this call has a pretty clear grasp on what that entails. But this is specifically the case, this is really felt very intimately by state broadband offices across the country as they try and figure out and do the math on how they can reach every unserved and underserved location in their state with the finite BEAD award allocation that they have received. $42.45 billion seems like a lot of money, but at the end of the day, when you look at the increased labor costs, the increased input costs, trying to balance commitments to affordability, a lot of the geographic and topographical diversity of a state, a couple $100 million or even $1 billion plus only is going to get you so far if you're focused on deploying one type of technology. That's why it's important that you approach state broadband officers have to approach the issue of bridging the digital divide in their state with a toolbox of broadband technologies. And finally, timely deployments matter. When we talk with legislators, we often ask them the question, if you had the option to close the digital divide in a matter of months versus a matter of years in your district or in your state, which would you choose? Everybody says that they want to close the digital divide sooner rather than later. And when you look at the technology choices that are available, there are technologies like next generation fixed wireless that can extend reliable, future proof broadband service to thousands of people in a matter of months, versus other technologies like fiber that may take years to ultimately reach every single home and will only take more time to scale as population density increases. Now, let's get to the heart of the matter and why we're here today. I'm sure most people on this call probably have a great grasp of what exactly the BEAD program is and what it entails. Passed by Congress in the form of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act in 2021, the BEAD program allocated $42.45 billion to all 50 states and U.S. territories to deploy broadband infrastructure to every unserved and underserved home in their state. There's a clear ranking and prioritization. Unserved homes are prioritized first, followed by underserved homes, and then finally followed by community anchor institutions. Now, in terms of where we are today, there are two documents that the states needed to submit to the NTIA for approval before any funding could be released to them for the purposes of beginning the subgrantee selection and application process. The first of these documents is the initial proposal, Volume 1. This document essentially frames how the state broadband offices are going to clarify and update their map or list of BEAD eligible locations in their state. Many states at this point in time have wrapped up or are in the middle of their challenge process right now. There are only a handful of states and territories that have yet to begin the challenge process. But with the volume 1 and the challenge process, I think it's integral that internet service providers, whether or not you plan to actually participate in BEAD in the form of submitting a subgrantee application, I'd recommend you participate in the challenge process, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. The second document is the initial proposal, Volume 2. This is the document that outlines how the states will hold a competitive subgrantee selection process for projects, and then ultimately how they will select projects to ensure that they will achieve the congressionally mandated goal of 100% universal service. And at this point in time, only two states have had both their Volume 1 and Volume 2 approved, Louisiana and Nevada. Nevada was a recent addition in the last week or so. And with the approval of Nevada, we're starting to get a much better sense as to what the NTIA will tolerate versus not tolerate when it comes to deviating outside of the BEAD notice of funding opportunity that has vexed many state broadband officers and internet service providers who want to participate meaningfully in this program. So there are a couple, when I have conversations with state broadband offices as well as internet service providers about the BEAD program, there are a couple of elements that I like to clarify. The first is that there's a misunderstanding that the BEAD program is exclusively a fiber program. A lot of wireless internet service providers in particular think that, well, this program does not apply to me because they're looking for wired infrastructure. I only do fixed wireless. Well, that's not exactly true. The BEAD Notice of Funding Opportunity, it's like many legal documents, is very detailed, but also contradicts itself multiple times. The BEAD Notice of Funding Opportunity has a preference for fiber, but it is certainly not a fiber mandate. At the end of the day, the BEAD Notice of Funding Opportunity prioritizes the goal of 100% universal service for all unserved and underserved locations over deployment of a certain technology type. there are a lot of state broadband offices in the initial process of drafting their initial proposal volume 2, talking about how they're going to structure their subgrantee application process, where they've said, well, we only have so much money, and we know we're not going to be able to reach the unserved and underserved with fiber, so we're just going to fund as much fiber infrastructure as possible, and we're going to hope and pray that more funding comes down the pipeline so folks can get the service that they need. The NTIA during the drafting process has been unequivocal in pushing back on those types of plans, and has instead forced state broadband offices to give an earnest, good faith try at developing a broadband plan that uses a multiplicity of technologies to reach every unserved and underserved location in their state. And again, with those alternate technologies, what's crucial is that they have to meet the appropriately high standards set by the NTIA for service. And that is 100 by 20 megabits per second at a latency of at least or less than or equal to 100 milliseconds. And there's a specific mix of quote unquote reliable technologies that comprises. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. The other element that I want to highlight, particularly with the BEAD program, is that a lot of state broadband offices understand that they're only with a given state and the varying population densities and challenging geographies and topographies, not every project area is going to be suitable to be served with one specific technology. When the NTIA drafted up the BEAD Notice of Funding Opportunity, they envisioned a process by which providers would bid for a project area with one specific technology. They would bid for one project area by serving everybody with fiber, or folks would bid for one project area using fixed wireless or some other technology. State broadband officers realize that's a limiting factor to being able to achieve high quality bids, and as a result, we're seeing a lot of states who have officially given their approval on providers submitting projects that utilize a mixture of technologies. Folks who are using fiber for 70% of the broadband serviceable locations in a project area, and then fixed wireless for the remaining 30%. This allows the states to get better project applications that ensure 100% universal service in a project area, while also stretching their dollars further and ensuring that a handful of broadband serviceable locations in a project area don't drive up the project cost and drain their finite awards much faster. So on the topic of reliable broadband, I want to take a moment to talk about how the NTIA defines reliable broadband. There was definitely a lot of confusion and a lot of concern about how the state broadband office defines reliable broadband, particularly in the context of fixed wireless. So what was clear was that they used the existing BDC technology codes to frame their BEAD NOFO, and they were clear. Fiber optic technology, hybrid fiber coaxial cable, DSL technology to a certain extent, and then terrestrial fixed wireless using licensed or a hybrid of licensed and unlicensed spectrum were considered to be reliable broadband technologies, assuming that they met the characteristics of qualifying broadband, the 100 by 20 megabits per second standard with the latency elements in mind. But what was really confusing for a lot of folks was the status of Tech Code 72 technologies, licensed by rule technologies, so fixed wireless systems that use CBRS, whether that's GAA or PAL. Tarana Wireless really worked aggressively to communicate this concern to the NTIA, and we even had the privilege of hosting NTIA Assistant Secretary Alan Davidson, pictured here, for a live technology demo out in Palo Alto to show him the advances in fixed wireless and to get a chance to sit down and talk with him about why Tech Code 72 technologies needed to be part of the solution for the BEAD program. And sure enough, after our discussion and a couple of follow-up discussions with the spectrum and policy teams at NTIA, we were really pleased to see an update to the BEAD Notice of Funding opportunity in the form of a FAQ, which was published probably more than 6 months ago, that clarified that CBRS was 100% going to be part of the BEAD program. Another element I want to talk to you folks about is the sequence of the BEAD program, because I think a lot of people don't really have a sense as to kind of the timing or the sequence of the constituent steps for each state with the BEAD program. And I think one part that's really confusing is that for each state, this process is distinct in some way or in some capacity. But there are a couple of general universal steps across the board that I think it's important for folks to have in mind as they weigh whether or not they want to participate in the BEAD process, and then also kind of how this process ultimately kind of can give you a certain sense of when to have your subgrantee application materials ready if participation in BEAD through the subgrantee process is something you're interested in. So first, as I mentioned, from the top, state has to submit its Volume 1 initial proposal, which outlines its challenge process to the NTIA. Once the NTIA approves the Volume 1 initial proposal, then the state can commence its challenge process, where it has, counties, nonprofits, citizens, and internet service providers submit service and availability challenges through a coordinated process where it's able to triage all of the data and requests that it gets, and ultimately it can make final decisions about which areas in the state are eligible for BEAD funding. This process generally runs around 30 to 60 days, depending on your state. Once the challenge process has been finished, I anticipate that the NTIA will then look to approve Volume 2 of the initial proposal. Why do I say I'm making this assumption? Well, one of the key things that I think a lot of state broadband officers have a bit of heartburn about is the fact that once the NTIA approves Volume 2 of a state's initial proposal, that state has 365 days to run a competitive subgrantee application process to ensure every single broadband serviceable location in the state has broadband service. And essentially the state has to credibly tell the NTIA that they have received all of the project applications and can certify that they will reach the goal of 100% universal service. Obviously, that's 365 days is a very short window for the state to effectively accept, receive, process, adjudicate, and then select project applications to cover every home and business in the state. So what I assume is that the NTIA is not going to want to pinch any of the state broadband offices by approving their Volume 2 while the state is undergoing its challenge process. I think the NTIA is going to coordinate with the states and is going to ensure that a given state has finished its challenge process, knows the final list or map of BEAD eligible locations, and then will approve Volume 2. So that way the states can hit the ground running when it comes to the subgrantee application process. So after NTIA approval of Volume 2, some states have a pre-qualification phase where they want internet service providers who are interested in participating in the BEAD program to submit certain documents about their business and their ability to participate effectively in the BEAD program. And really, that includes submitting documents about the personnel on your staff, the qualifications of your technicians, the technologies that you presumably are going to bid, all manner of information that essentially suggests to your ability to successfully participate and succeed in the BEAD program. Now, The reason why I say that this step is optional is because some states have a explicit pre-qualification phase, others do not. I would recommend that you look at your respective state's state broadband office website and look for any indication as to whether or not they have a pre-qualification phase. I would also recommend that you can probably reach out to your state broadband office via email, and I am sure they will probably be fairly responsive to you, as they are definitely interested in ensuring that all manner of internet service providers are able to participate in the BEAD program. But assuming that, once the pre-qualification phase, or generally the NTIA approves volume 2 of the initial proposal, then you have the subgrantee application process, which is the process by which the state will receive applications from internet service providers to serve a certain set of project areas. They will make a selection as to which applications are successful, and then they will prepare a final proposal. The state broadband office will prepare a final proposal document, which they submit to the NTIA, which has their proposed plan to achieve the goal of 100% universal service. So, in terms of looking ahead on the horizon as to some next steps for BEAD, I think that, as I alluded to, there are really only a handful of states and territories that have not had their BEAD Volume 1 approved. I anticipate that those states are probably going to get approval from the NTIA in the next 2 weeks, assuming that the issues that the NTIA has with their Volume 1 are not too intractable. And then in terms of when the BEAD Volume 2s will be approved, I think this is, again, going to really be impacted by when your state wraps up its challenge process. Because again, the NTIA does not want to short state broadband offices out of valuable time to run their subgrantee application process. The NTIA has told us in conversation that they anticipate that most BEAD Volume 2s will be approved by late May or early July. Some states are really behind the ball on their Volume 1 and have only just recently gotten approval. And I think that means that you will probably see some states who do not get NTIA BEAD approval of their Volume 2 until probably, let's say, closer to late summer, early fall. If you're interested in participating in the subgrantee application process, I think there are a couple of questions that you really need to start asking yourself if you haven't already. The first is, what is your capacity to provide matching funds? The BEAD program has a minimum 25% match as part of the program. I think you should really figure out, to what extent you can meet or exceed that matching element. The other element is, of course, your ability to offer a low-cost affordability plan. Each state has a certain amount of, there's a certain amount of wiggle room when it comes to this low-cost affordability plan. But I think with the recent development of the phase-out of ACP, the Affordable Connectivity Program, I think that this is particularly top of mind for states in the NTIA as they look to ensure that the program is successful. The next question is, are you able to provide service that exceeds the 100 by 20 megabits per second threshold? I think that it's really crucial that ISPs demonstrate that they are deploying technologies that are scalable and can increase customer need if that is warranted or if that is the case. I think that this is especially important for non-fiber project bids, where folks need to demonstrate that the technologies that they are deploying are going to be lasting and able to keep pace with the projected rising data needs of customers. The next element I would say is, developing rapport with your broadband office. Surprisingly, broadband offices, I think, are very accessible, especially to internet service providers that have questions. And I would say, now is the time to start developing the rapport with your broadband office. Shoot them an email, ask to get on a call with them. It's important to get FaceTime so that they know who you are and that, you are a trusted member of your community. The other question is, of course, does your state have a pre-qualification round? There's going to be some variation here state by state. I would recommend that you look to your state's website or Volume 1 initial proposal or Volume 2 initial proposal to figure out if there's a pre-qualification round and start gathering the documentation that you need. And then finally, if you're a wireless internet service provider, I would start making connections with fiber providers in your area who you think might be interested in participating in BEAD. I think we're going to see a lot of collaborative subgrantee applications where fiber providers partner with a wireless internet service provider to submit a competitive and comprehensive BEAD application that utilizes a mixture of technologies to achieve the goal of 100% universal service. And finally, I just want to talk a little bit about what Tarana Wireless can do to help providers with the BEAD program. First, we currently have Tarana Wireless has our CBRS G1 product that operates in both GAA and PAL. That is currently available on the market. We already have a lot of interest from folks who are going to be bidding our CBRS technology as part of their BEAD project application. I think that if you're interested in having a fixed wireless component, I think that our CBRS product is certainly going to be top of the pops in terms of being able to get extra points for the scoring elements in terms of being able to offer higher speeds, being future-proof, and being robust and resilient when it comes to climate-related issues. Another element we can help you with is helping you get your CostQuest Tier D license. If you're interested in participating in the BEAD program, you certainly are going to need your CostQuest Tier D license. I'll have my contact info at the end of the slides, and you can reach out to me about trying to get your CostQuest license. It should be a relatively quick process. Finally, Tarana Wireless is, our doors are open in terms of working with ISP partners for their network planning and design. If you're going to be incorporating our CBRS product, you can reach out to, if you're already working with a sales rep or if you're already working through ISP supplies, reach out and we can make those connections and start talking today. And the next element that's in the works is our grant writing, financing, resources, and more. We're currently working at assembling a roster of grant writers and some financing help for folks who are interested in participating in BEAD. As we have those available, we will start to promote that as we want to make sure that customers are able to competitively and effectively be part of the BEAD program. And with that, I think we're ready to go to questions. Thank you all so much for your time listening to this webinar and looking forward to answering some questions about BEAD.
Hey, excellent presentation. Thank you, Gabriel, for covering all that info in detail. As anticipated, we did have quite a few questions rolling, so let's cover as many as we can, time permitting. One of them is, are there any particular states that stand as having good BEAD plans to achieve universal service?
Great question. I've probably read at least 45 to 50 initial proposal volume twos. There are a couple of states that really stick out in my mind. First, the state of Kansas has really been super forthright about the fact that they don't have enough money to achieve universal service with just fiber. And they've even posited the figure that at least 25% of the broadband serviceable locations in their state will have to be served with fixed wireless technology. That open-mindedness and that candor, I think, is really important for signaling to internet service providers that they have a space at the table to effectively compete. And moreover, Kansas is showing that they're not going to let a specific technology type dictate whether or not they are able to achieve the goal of universal service. Another two states that come to mind, Arizona and Pennsylvania, are both states that are pretty technology agnostic when it comes to achieving the goal of universal service. And they have created scoring criteria in their Volume 2 initial proposal that incentivize providers to deploy high performance non-fiber technologies. As I like to say, it's not a partisan issue. I just listed a blue, a red, and a purplish state that are all committed to achieving the goal of universal service using a diverse mix of technologies.
Thank you very much. Another good question here is, are Tarana Wireless products BABA compliant? BABA referring to the Build America, Buy America Act.
Great question. Yes. So Tarana Wireless's existing G1 products are BABA compliant. There's a little bit of a wrinkle in that the Department of Commerce has not published the final self-certification guidelines for BABA. So a lot of vendors will have to self-certify that they're BABA compliant. They haven't published the formal guidelines as to how we certify we are compliant. However, we've worked with outside counsel to develop, to certify that we are in fact BABA compliant, and we've developed a basic draft documentation for internet service providers to use when discussing with local municipalities and counties about their plans to bid us for their BEAD programs. But the short answer is yes, we are BABA compliant.
Awesome, thank you. Will the NTIA, also known as the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, allow states to use their funds to deploy fiber infrastructure?
Yes, but they will not, let states deploy solely fiber if it's not going to reach every unserved and underserved broadband serviceable location. There are a couple of states who I'm not going to name that have certainly tried to submit initial proposal volume twos that explicitly look to do just that. The NTIA has been really aggressive in pushing back on those states, and as a result, we've seen a real course correction from a couple of states that have had to submit new volume 2 initial proposals that incorporate non-fiber technologies as part of their accepted technology mix for the purpose of reaching universal service. So, fiber is not going to trump, the goal of universal service in terms of the BEAD program.
That's very good to know. Thank you. And that's where a WISP partnering up with a local fiber provider for BEAD applications comes into play there too. So
absolutely.
Very good. And how can I keep track of my state's BEAD program?
That's a great question. So I think, one thing is, I would really recommend, if you haven't already, take a look at your state broadband office's website. I'm sure that they have a website online. The NTIA also has a really pretty decent, I would say, dashboard that tracks the approval process of each state's initial proposal volume 1 and volume 2. If you look up NTIA BEAD dashboard on your preferred search engine, I'm sure that'll pop up, and you should be able to see where your state stands in this in the BEAD process.
Thank you. A couple more here. As an ISP, how should I look at participating in the BEAD challenge process?
That's a great question. So for the states that have not yet completed their BEAD challenge process, I would really recommend that internet service providers think about participating in that challenge process. Why do I say that? First, I think that if you're an ISP, you want to make sure that your network territory is accurately reflected on your in your state's challenge process, that all of your customers are shown as receiving service and therefore are not going to be overbuilt by BEAD funded infrastructure. The first step to make sure that you are that your service network is accurately reflected is by acquiring your CostQuest Tier D license, which is separate from the CostQuest license that you may have needed to get for the purposes of your BDC filings. This is a specific CostQuest data license for the BEAD program. So I recommend that you look to get that. And make sure that your service network is accurately reflected in the list of BEAD eligible locations, or not reflected in the list of BEAD eligible locations. Moreover, if you are going to be building out broadband infrastructure in your state, just on your own volition, and you know that you will have service offerings ready by June 30th of this year, I would recommend that you also look to participate in the BEAD challenge process and file a planned service challenge. If you're potentially interested in that, please feel free to reach out to this email, govaffairs@taranawireless.com, and we can talk a little bit about that with you.
Perfect. And I think we have time for one more question. This one's a two-part question. You did mention that CBRS is BEAD compliant. Does 6 gigahertz qualify for BEAD funding? And if not now, do you think it will ever qualify?
That's a great question. So from our initial outreach with the NTIA, 6 gigahertz at this point in time does not qualify um, for B is not BEAD eligible. It's not considered reliable broadband service. 6 gigahertz is technically considered to be unlicensed spectrum. However, if you were to take 6 gigahertz and if you were to add it to licensed or licensed by rule service, so kind of have a dual band system, then that would be eligible for BEAD funding. And I think that you're definitely going to be seeing that coming soon, probably in the next year.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Gabriel. And that seems to be all the time that we have today. Special thank you to everyone who took the time to join us and learn about the current government funding opportunities available to ISPs everywhere nationwide. For anyone who is ready to look at deploying Tarana Wireless equipment, please reach out to us at sales@ispsupplies.com or give us a call at 855-WISP-PRO, which comes out to 855-947-7776 to get started. And as previously mentioned, we will be sharing a recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel as well as on social media. So please make sure to subscribe and follow us as well. So that's all the time that we have for today. Wishing everyone a great rest of your week. And thanks again, Gabriel, for covering all that information. And until next time, everyone.
Thanks, folks.